Today's video is sponsored by Sprocket 365. Finally, create a robust knowledge base in SharePoint. For more details, visit them today at sprocket365.com. This time it's the turn of Microsoft Exchange and a skills workout that you'll not forget. Are you ready to learn? Well, you know what they say, every now and then you have to do a little workout, isn't that right? So on today's episode, I thought I'd take you through Microsoft Exchange. Especially if you're a beginner or intermediate user, this is going to be awesome for you guys. Now, Andy Malone, Microsoft MVP, if this is your first visit, I really do appreciate it. Microsoft Exchange has been around for quite a number of years, and it's in both the on-premises format and more recently, of course, in the cloud format. So I thought in this episode, I'm going to take you on a kind of journey from zero to hero and have a look at Microsoft Exchange on-premises and also online as well. And we'll talk about some of the differences between them, the pros and the cons, and some of the essential skills that I think you're going to need. Now, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, as always, go ahead, bump the subscribe button up there and ring the bell and come and join my learning community. And if you enjoy the video, go ahead, hit the like button. It does make a difference to the channel. And questions and comments, as always, about this or any of my videos, as always, get them down below and I'll do my best for you. And finally, of course, if you want more and you want to gain access to full Microsoft courses, monthly Zoom calls, and so much more, go ahead and sign up to my Patreon site, details just down below. So I think without any further ado, it's about time we jump in and have a look at Microsoft Exchange, the Skills Challenge. Are you ready? Okay, so to start with, I'm starting off in my domain controller and I'm coming into tools and I'm going to come into Active Directory users and computers. So the first thing that I'm going to show you is Exchange Server, and this is Exchange Server 2019. And as you can see, I'm in the OU called IT, and I've created a user here called Captain Kirk. As you know, I'm a big Trekkie. So I've gone ahead and completed the account. I've created that account for Captain Kirk. And what I want to do now is I want to create a mailbox for Captain Kirk. So I'm just going to switch over to my Exchange server. So I'm just going to come in here and I've kind of already gone ahead and pre-configured the Exchange server and set it up. I can come into the start menu here and just scroll up and you can see that we've got Exchange 2019 here. Now, of course, there's two ways to administer it. You can either use the Exchange Admin Center, which is the UI version, or, of course, you can use PowerShell, or as we know it, the Exchange Management Shell. Exchange kind of has its own version of the management shell, and I'll cover this in a later edition, by the way. So I'm opening up the Exchange Admin Center, and actually here's one I've already got open here. And you can see, first of all, let's have a quick tour. So the interface here, this is the Exchange Admin Center, and you can see that we have a number of menu options going down the page, as well as a number of menu options going across the page here. So you can see that I have a number of mailboxes here, and these are called recipients. Okay, now there are a number of different types of recipients that you can have. You can create a user mailbox or a mailbox linked to, let's say, an external user or something like that. But for the purpose of this demo, I'm just going to create a user mailbox. So the first thing it's going to ask is it an existing user, or do you want to create a new user? So if I chose a new user, it would obviously go ahead and it would create a new user in Windows Server. But in this case, I'm just going to go ahead because I've already created one already, and I want to say I'm looking for a user called Kirk J. And of course, I could just type that in here, but my user, of course, is Captain Kirk. So I'm just going to select the user and click OK. And it then says, okay, do you want to go ahead and do you want to save that? Again, I don't have any other info in here at the moment. So I'm just going to save this, and just takes a moment. and it will then create a mailbox for my user. So now my user has not only got a user account, he's also got a mailbox as well. So just before we kind of look at the properties of the mailbox, let's talk about some of the other things that we can see here. So first of all, you can see that it talks about the users. So these are mailboxes or recipients. The other type of recipient, of course, you can also have group mailboxes. And in groups here, you've got 3 types of groups. You can have a distribution group, which is essentially just a mailing list. You can have a security group. So a security group is typically assigned for permissions. And also you can have a dynamic distribution group that you can create with dynamic rules. You can also create resource mailboxes as well, and this is something that I've covered in a previous video. And on the server edition, those resources can either be a room or a piece of equipment. You can also create contacts here as well. So a contact, you've got 2 types of contact, a mail contact or a mail user. What's the difference? So a mail user would be a user who has an account in Active Directory, whereas a mail contact is somebody external. So for example, a contractor or supplier. You can also create a shared mailbox as well. Again, you can do this in Microsoft 365. Shared mailboxes are great because they provide a shared mailbox. So if there's a group of salespeople, you all get the same mailbox. In this tab as well, we also have the migration options here. So if you currently have an Exchange server on premises, you can come in here and you can move content to either a different database or you can move to this forest. Now you'll notice here that the migration tab here is different to the option that we have here. So hybrid is if you're in hybrid mode with Microsoft 365. So the other thing that we have here are the Exchange admin roles. And essentially this is where you have got different administrator roles. So we know that in any organization it's not good to have a global admin as such. So what we have here are a specific set of admin roles. So you can see these admin roles if you want somebody to be have help desk admin roles in Exchange. So when we talk about an Exchange admin, we don't just give all our admins Exchange admin roles. You can actually grant them delegated specific features of that role. So for example, I want Bob just to be able to create public folders or something like that. We also have user roles here as well. And this is, you have one user default policy here. And if I go into the default policy, typically this is to do with user permissions. So in other words, this shows the user, the user can see their contact information, the address information, mail information, personal information, your display name, all your profile and things like that. But maybe you don't want certain users to be able to see that. Or perhaps if you were in a school, you don't want those default settings. So you might go ahead and create another assignment policy with different settings and set this to the kids' accounts, for example. It's quite useful. You can also do the same thing for Outlook Web Access as well. So again, we have Outlook Web Access policies. So, and you can see here, you have a default policy, and again, you have a selection of features. So if I have my users coming in over Outlook Web Access, which essentially this is what this is, again, which features do you want them to have access to? So journaling, security, do you want them to see places, weather, themes, and so on? Get the idea? File access. Do you want them to have direct file access? Do you want to have offline access for your email? Again, but the default is yes. But again, there may be groups of individuals that you don't want that. So then we've got things like compliance management. Now in Microsoft 365, all of these features have been pretty much taken over in Microsoft Purview. But here you can set them up. But remember that in Microsoft Exchange, it's specifically for Microsoft Exchange mailboxes. So things like data loss prevention policies, retention policies, and retention tags. So I can create retention policies that essentially contain a number of retention tags, and my users can then choose to retain specific email, let's say from the tax office for 7 years and so on. In here as well, you've also got the add-ins tab, so you can add in any additional components. So for example, maps and any templates that you might have. You might have an unsubscribe page that recipients want to add on. And you can also create address lists here. So again, this is where you can create your various address lists. And by default, of course, you have a global address list that every user is a member of. But perhaps you have created an address list that you only want to assign to certain mailboxes or certain users. So that's quite useful there. Then we can come to the protection tab. So in the protection tab here, you can see that we've got things like your malware filter. So again, if you're in Microsoft 365, this feature is actually taken by Microsoft Defender for 365. So all of these settings are in the Microsoft Defender. This feature, the actual what it's called, is EOP, Exchange Online Protection here. Now, in terms of controlling your mail flow, you can see that we have a number of different menu options here. So again, you've got the rules. So if you want to create any specific rules, and this is very similar to the rules that you get in Outlook. The only difference here, of course, is it affects every user. We also have delivery reports. So if you want to create an NDR or non-delivery report, you can do that. That's not a good idea because it could potentially give hackers more information than you're looking for. We can also see accepted domains. So who do you want to accept mail from? And you can see default, it's accepting it from everyone. Again, you've got email address policies, you've got the default here, and again, you've got receive connectors. So in other words, the receive connector here, it's saying who and where do I want to accept email from. And again, in this case, you can see I'm just using a single organization. We also have the mobile tab here as well. So if you're running mobile devices on your network, the feature here is called Active Sync. And Active Sync, of course, is responsible for syncing email. And you can set up mobile device policies here. Again, in Microsoft 365, these features are now managed in Microsoft Intune. So in Microsoft Exchange, we have something called a public folder. And a public folder is exactly that. It's just sharing documents and information. In Microsoft 365, of course, we have Microsoft 365 groups, which of course you can upgrade to Teams. Now, if you have multiple servers in your environment, so in this example, you can see that I'm actually running 2 servers. So I'm using Exchange 1 and also Exchange 2. Now you'll notice that these are what we call mailbox servers, and I can double click on these and have a look at the various properties. Now the big thing about Exchange on premises, of course, is that it's a database, and like any database, you need to be able to maintain it. So in here, of course, this is where you can specify, for example, what type of traffic are you going to accept. You're going to talk about, create perhaps what we call a DAG, a database availability group. So if you had multiple servers, you could replicate the database onto other servers. Very important, because you don't want a single kind of place of failure, if you will. Then it talks about the types of email. These two protocols, email protocols, are pretty legacy, if I have to be honest, and typically you wouldn't use them because they're not very secure. Unified messaging is a kind of spillover. You see it's not set up here. That's to do with if you had Microsoft Link server or Skype for Business server doing mobile phone calls and things like that. And you can see we don't have that here. So like I said, you've got your databases here. Talks about the databases. This is where, again, you can create these database availability groups for that. Virtual directories in here, of course, if you've got this is a feature that's used by IIS. So for example, in here you've got things like your Exchange control panel, you've got your Exchange web server here, and these are all the web pages. So if you want things like secure connectivity and so on, this is where you would come in here. Of course, you'll notice here that in my tenant or in my client here, I'm using HTTP, and it's complaining that I've not configured HTTPS. And the reason is, of course, I've not configured a digital certificate here, and that's actually the reason. Finally, the hybrid option here allows me to extend my Exchange server so that I can connect to Microsoft 365. And indeed, you can see that I've got two tabs up here on the top left. One that says my enterprise, which in other words is my on-premises environment, and the Office 365 would be my tenant in the cloud. And in essence, when you go into hybrid, it actually sees the hybrid server as an extension of just what you've got on premises. So in essence, it sees the Exchange server, or it would see Exchange Online essentially just as another server on your network. So coming back then to recipients after that little tour, as I mentioned, we have a number of mailboxes, and I've gone ahead and I've created a mailbox. So if I double click the mailbox, let's have a look at it. And in here you can see it's picked up all the settings from Active Directory. So there are a few things, of course, again, if you can create users here as well, of course, and it will create the users in Active Directory. Do you want to hide the user from the address list? Again, you can do that. So mailbox usage, again, it's giving me a warning, and the reason it's doing that is because I'm not yet logged on as Captain Kirk. But once I would log on, it would then give me the date and time of when that user last logged on. Of course, if I filled in any of this information in Active Directory, it would come through. And again, the organization details, these are just kind of free to fill in. And you can see that we have an SMTP address, kirk@adatum.com in this case. You can also enable the mailbox features here. So things like a default sharing policy, the default role assignment policy. Have you configured a retention policy for the user? And again, in this case, you might just use the default mailbox retention policy. I've actually covered this in previous videos, by the way. Okay, so you can see that you've done those settings. If I scroll down, I can see other options. So do you want to do, these are pretty old connections, so I don't use that. This is, do I want to place the user's mailbox on litigation hold? So perhaps you want to do an investigation, or maybe the user's leaving the company, and you want to maybe reassign this mailbox to another user. What you could do is place this user on hold, delete the user account, create a new user, and attach this mailbox to the new user, and then take it off hold. That's really useful, by the way. Something that you can also do is you can create a mailbox archive. So a mailbox archive, of course, allows your users, so I can say, hey, I want to, let's say, where shall we store the user's data? Again, I'm just going to store it in the user's database here. and I'll just click OK, and I've now set that up. Other things that you can control, things like Mailflow. So do you want to configure any delivery options? So for example, do you want to forward this user's mailbox to a different user, for example? Do you want to set up a maximum number of recipients that this user can use in the CC or BCC fields? So remember, the CC fields, every user sees that, whereas BCC, that's blind carbon copies. So they wouldn't know that it's, for example, going to 30 different users. So once you've completed that, again, is the user a member of a group? I've not made any groups yet. You can also put in a little mail tip here as well. So welcome to my company. If you need any help, please call 555, for example. And very importantly, of course, you can delegate the mailbox. Now, again, you can do exactly the same thing in Microsoft 365. So we have essentially a number of different sets of permissions here. So you can send as. So send as means that you're actually, let's say you've James Bond and Miss Moneypenny. I could give this to Miss Moneypenny and she could actually send as James Bond. Whereas send on behalf of, it would come through as Miss Moneypenny forwarding from James Bond, sending on behalf of James Bond. Or if you wanted to grant a user full access to the mailbox. And again, you can see here, it's essentially yourself that's got that permission. So there you go. Those are the mailbox properties that we have. Let's jump over now and compare this with Microsoft 365. Okay, so having looked at Microsoft Exchange Server, what we're going to do now is jump over and have a look at Microsoft Exchange Online and just kind of have a nice kind of comparison between them. And you'll actually see that there are a lot of similarities. Now, the one main difference that you'll notice is the interface. Microsoft are really focusing a lot of attention on their cloud solution. So you can see here that the portal pretty much matches that kind of Microsoft 365 look. So that very much kind of modern look. And this kind of tells me, and I'm sure it tells you as well, is that Microsoft are kind of focusing all of its attention in its cloud products rather than its on-premises products. And the on-premises interface kind of looks a little legacy now, in fact. So what we have here is your main portal here, and you can see that we have a number of these cards. As with all of the interfaces, you can move these around and you can also customize them as well. I can go into light mode or dark mode if I want to. I can add in additional cards, and you can see at a glance you can kind of customize this main screen to how you want it to look. So just like Microsoft Exchange Server, we also have recipients. We have the same kind of recipients here. The one difference here, though, is that you'll notice you cannot create recipients. You have to create them through Microsoft 365. So within 365, of course, you would come in and you would typically go into the users here. And when you create your users, it also creates a mailbox for the user, of course, depending on the license that you have. So you can see here that we have options to create a shared mailbox. You can also control the Mailflow settings here for your users, and it's a context-sensitive menu. So if you select mailboxes, you'll notice that the menu changes. So for example, I want to hide these options from the mailing list, or from the address list rather. You can also control mail delegation here, mailbox policies. So Microsoft have really spent a lot of time on kind of shortcut menus. So this can be quite useful if you're trying to find things, I think. Because if you go into, for example, the property of a mailbox here, you'll notice that we have the Organisation tab. You've got details on the mailbox, shows you the mailbox usage here, how much has been used. There's that last logon option that I showed you earlier on the server version. You've got the email version there, of course. You can hide the mailbox. You've got email forwarding, and you've got the send on behalf of here. So that's those permissions that I mentioned. You've also got the organization settings here as well. So again, you can send reports to a particular manager, and there's exactly the same mailbox delegation. So send as, send on behalf of, and of course read and manage full control. Email forwarding, of course, so if you want to forward that, so users on vacation or something, you can forward it to an alternate email address if you want to. Now, the one thing that you'll notice about the portals here is that in Exchange Server, when you opened a window, they were in separate kind of windows. Here, everything is kind of connected, which I really like. So the other things that we've got here, again, those different types of recipients. So I can create a group here. Now, the only difference here in the cloud is rather than just creating the likes of a public folder, you can also create a Microsoft 365 group. So a Microsoft 365 group is a fully collaborative group, of course, that you can view in Microsoft Outlook. So, for example, if I jumped across here and had a look, let's say, for example, in Microsoft Outlook, not only do you get your email here, but you also have, for example, your various groups. So the various groups that you're a member of, for example, the Contoso team, you get the shared mailbox, and it's all about collaboration. You get the shared document library, files, events, calendars, members, and again, there's other things as well, such as things like a OneNote book, a SharePoint document library, and so on. So that's the real benefit over the likes of, let's say, public folders, where you only get a public folder for sharing documents, and you've got to create a shared mailbox separately. It was kind of all separated there. So other things that we've got then, so there's your recipient types. Resource mailboxes here, again, exactly the same. So you can see in this case, I've created a number of resource mailboxes there. Just to mention, as before, I did a dedicated video on this, and it's in this playlist. So again, go ahead and check that out. Okay, the other things that you might want to control are those Mailflow rules there. So we have a couple of tools here. We have what we call a message trace tool, and you can see that there's some samples here as well. This is quite useful for troubleshooting. So for example, if a user complains that their mail is not getting through, this is a message trace, and it allows you to go in and view any email that's maybe getting stuck at the sender side or at your side. Maybe there's a problem, maybe they're wrong security rule or something. Again, you've got those remote domain rules. You've got the accepted domains, just like in Exchange Server. You've got the rules here. So again, this is your rules. You can see that these are being moved into data loss prevention policies now in Microsoft Purview. A recent addition to Microsoft Exchange Online is high volume email. So you can create what we call a high volume account here. And again, you can see you can send up to very high amounts of email, very useful for things like marketing and so on. You've also got the migration tab here as well. So this is particularly useful. It's kind of similar to it was in Exchange, the server. So you can create what we call a migration batch. And of course, you can choose whether you want to migrate into Exchange or you want to migrate out of Exchange as well. And this is pretty good because if I just call this data, if I just call it demo, and I'll click next. It will then prompt me for what type of migration do I want to do. So a remote move migration is essentially hybrid. So a hybrid solution is essentially where your Exchange server sees Exchange Online just as another server on the network. Particularly useful for long-term kind of connectivity if you've got many mailboxes. And of course, here you're not migrating a mailbox, you're moving a mailbox from one server technically to another. And that can really save you a lot of time. Staged and cutover mailboxes are, for example, if you're moving from old Exchange servers. So again, a staged is if you would use this if you've got, let's say, Entra ID Connect connected. A cutover migration is basically designed for small business. So again, click. It basically creates the user accounts in Microsoft 365, migrates to mail, and all you need to do is then cut that cord and flip that box over and use it as a coffee table. Other things that we've got, cross-tenant migration. I actually covered that on a previous video. And also you've got things like if you're migrating to other systems as well, for example, Google Workspace there. All right, so again, that's the migration wizard. Check out the documents on learn.microsoft.com there. Insights, of course, gives you an idea on Mailflow, just kind of useful rules. Public folders, mentioned that already. Organisational sharing, okay, so this is if you, again, you want to set up not just organisational sharing, so you might want to set up a relationship between maybe two different divisions, two different tenants, or you can also enable individual mailbox sharing as well. And again, you can create, for example, a sharing policy. So the sharing policy, you can say, specify the domain to share. So in this case, I'm going to share with all domains or just a specific domain. So, mycompany.com, for example. So the default is all domains. Do you want to share your calendar, of course? Then you've got your options here. So again, how do you want to share that out? And then ultimately, you want to share your contacts. Again, maybe for security reasons, you might not want that. You'll notice here that that's disconnected. So these things you can actually disconnect. So very much you have the choice. So I just click on OK, click Next, and essentially that's it. And that's how I share or allow my users essentially to share their calendars. Okay. Then we've got a couple of settings here. There's that hybrid setup. So very much like, in fact, very identical to the one in Exchange Server. So you can set that up. And you've also got things like other features. So the other features, these are kind of mostly legacy features that you might find in Exchange Server that are currently being migrated across to the Microsoft 365. Now, interestingly, that you'll notice it says the 365 Admin Center here. And the reason for that is if you come across to the Admin Center and let's say click on Adele here, you'll notice that there is a Mail tab here. And in fact, as I look, you'll see through the properties of the user account, there's an awful lot of kind of integrated Exchange fields. So again, here you can see those mailbox permissions here, those send on behalf of, send as. You've got things like email forwarding. You can place the user account on litigation hold here as well. So I love this, the fact that you're not dancing around having a look at separate portals. It's really nice. And I love the way that the interface looks now. It's much more customizable, much friendlier. So there you have it, Microsoft Exchange Server and Microsoft Exchange Online. I hope that you found that really useful. If you got questions, of course, as always, get those down below and I'll do my best for you. Just to mention, if you want learning materials on any of this, check out learn.microsoft.com. All the documents, white papers and so on are all up there. So best of luck. Okay, that's it for this time. Thanks so much for joining me. You take care. Hey, thanks so much for dropping by today. Here's a couple of videos that you may enjoy, and while you're here, go ahead, click on the subscribe button and you won't miss out.